Okay, so this is another devlog. This time I have been working on that Damus Web app for the past couple weeks. It's been a pretty fun experience. So a couple weeks ago, I guess Jack from Twitter, he came on or discovered the protocol and funded some of the development. So there's been a lot of things going on, or basically scaling. So initially, like I wanted to have like a Twitter version, and that's kind of what I did with the old Damus Web. But when it started scaling, it basically went from 50 users to like 30,000 users pretty fast in the span of about a week, in which Damus Web, I don't know if it would have really ran properly. I think it would have still ran. I think there's a lot of things might have broke though. There's a lot of things that didn't scale. So I've had a lot of fun in the past 2 weeks actually working on this project. I kind of sworn off web front-end development, but this was really fun. It was a really new project. That it was really different. It's not. First of all, I've never experienced scale that fast before, so that was really fun. Everything is just constantly breaking. You fix one thing, and then the next thing you know, like some other feature that just stopped working because it wasn't built for scale. So like there's these phases of scaling that occur. It's like you go from like 50 users initially, and it's like, okay, everything's great. Then you add 50 more, and some things start to break. And then 100 more, and then some more things start to break. So it's not like you're building something and it just continually breaks because you're building it wrong. It's like there's these different things that you weren't thinking about when you coded the initial software that then then this just breaks. And a lot of it has to do with like most recent one was like I decided to cache everything in IndexedDB because it'd have larger storage size. Well, I naively just saved all events, and little did I imagine that I'd have 50,000 events saved in the database, and so I was saving them all at once, and that was a really naive thing to do. So I just had to delete the caching technique that I replaced because it was like kind of the same as before, just a different method. So basically I had to it was a lot of fun because I had to rewrite the whole app and then figure out how to do things at scale, because not only is it purely front end, you're dealing with multiple servers and points of data, and then there's also like security implications that you have to think of as well. So I think Damus Web, before I even had within like a few days before I even had a working version of the upgrade of Damus Web, which I've renamed here, it was taken offline because there's exploits where you could execute code on the web client, right? Because cross-site scripting, that kind of thing, from WebSockets. As soon as you render an event here on the page, you can render HTML or scripts that will then steal your private keys, or just steal other information. Like so, if you had direct messaging in there which used encryption, you'd be able to see the user's direct messages even if you're using an extension, right? So there's a lot of issues with developing for the web, but there are ways around them. So I learned new APIs for the web, which was really cool. I think the web or the browser's come a long way, but it's also kind of concreted my idea that I don't think JavaScript's a good language. I don't think the APIs are designed that well either. Working with IndexedDB I found to be very painful. And since you don't have you have the DOM, you can either draw everything in the canvas, which is then you might as well use your own rendering engine, Although I agree that the canvas works great for other things. Like Figma uses canvas, and I think they make an awesome. That's a great use of canvas. But for this, you just want to use the DOM, and if you have 50,000 events rendered in there, to render them all at once just kills the browser, right? So you can't do that. So just switching tabs, you can even see here it's kind of slow, though it's probably slow because it's recording. But yeah, it has to take all the events and inject them. So you use document fragments, but then you have to like limit it to 500 events that you want to see on the page. So that was a learning process. I thought I had built like a nice performant single timeline view, but I still ran into performance issues. Like it is funny because I like wrote my own what is it called, binary search to sort everything, or not, yeah, binary search to find events, and then also like a binary search to insert events, like where should this event go in the timeline kind of thing. And that first technique didn't work at all, and that was kind of slow. So I had to switch to approach where I do very similar as Twitter. You can see right here I have this show new. You can see the counter going up because it's connected to the internet and everyone's sending a message instantly. But if you're inserting events into the timeline in different places, it just kills it as more and more events get added to it. So this way, actually, like I was able to maintain my timeline code and have one timeline, and when you switch views, all it does is it deletes everything in there, and then it just finds all of the events that should be displayed, puts it in a document fragment, and then puts it into the timeline. So then anything after that, you simply just use this little notifier saying, hey, there's new things to see, and then you click on it and it shows them anything that's newer than the last event there. This doesn't always work. So there's like, when you're first loading, say for example, a user profile or a thread, you have to wait for everything to load. And then it might make, if you go here, it might work here. You have to wait for everything to load. And then once it's loaded, then it like actually just redraws dumbly like the whole thing. So there, if you were to watch like an embed or video, it would redraw it, and that would be kind of annoying. Let's see if I can find a thread. See a thread there? Yeah. So you just saw it just like it replaced everything there. So it's pretty fast. My aim with this was to be secure and fast. And I think I did that. But I think the protocol itself, Nostr, has proven very hard to take on as like a little hobby project. You need somebody to work on it like full time on an app, and I just don't know if I have it in me to continue working on it because the features go on forever. I'm kind of surprised I got as far as I did. But yeah, since the last time I demoed this Nostr client, some things have changed. So I renamed it Yosup because I had my own fork, and the web fork, or the original web repository, wasn't going to get updated. And it might still work, as I was saying before, but I highly doubt it. But the other reason why I wanted to rename it was because I wanted it to, I thought the feature parity was different, and it wasn't a carbon copy of what Damus iOS was. So I decided to rename it something. My idea for it was to be more friendly to normies, as we put it. I really wanted it to be something that somebody could understand. But I think it's got a long ways to go before that's even possible. The other things is, so since I rewrote, the timeline, like before there was the Explorer view, and then there was, I don't think there was notifications, but basically, you have your different views, but now you can actually go and view threads. So you can view the thread, and actually it shows in there. So that's new. You can view like threads starting at a certain place. You can view the code as well, which is great. The event details. Then you can reply to everyone, or you can just reply to one person. So it would reply to Lyndon instead. Then there's actual settings here, so you can add relays, and then you can, oh that's a bug. You can remove relays. They can show embeds from everyone. And I moved the sign up button as well. And then there's also just kind of like this FAQs that I wanted to add for new people. So the other thing is like, you can sign out and there's an actual welcome screen, but in order to show that, I guess I'll have to actually show it on here. Yeah, so this would be the welcome screen. A lot left to be desired. But it's better than what we had before, which was just like if you didn't enter a key, it'd be like, what is this? And just like it would just cancel out. So the other thing that's interesting is like there's not really any caching anymore. So it will save your settings using IndexedDB and your contacts, but saving your contacts is not really useful at all because it fetches all your contacts from one of the relays and then it takes whatever the latest contact list is and then replaces that. And the other thing is that it has like this queuing system for profiles unless you go to a profile, and then sometimes it will just not load. Eventually it loads, as you can see there, it just loaded. But I have some work to do in the UX here where you have to show like a loading indicator. That'd be nice. Other than that, it's very different from any app I've built because of the nature of how you have to deal with everything with data coming from multiple places, which to be honest, that's already abstracted away, so I don't have to deal with that. But there is the issue where if you're connected to a relay, you get an event from one relay, then you want to get the contact information from that relay, and then you want to get it from another relay and that kind of thing. So there is a bit of trickery you have to do. So like, for example, for getting profiles, I have a queue for each relay, and then when I go through the fetching process, it goes for each relay, then fetch these profiles, and then it gets all the events and it goes through a central event processing process. So that's basically the update. The code is very complicated. I think I'm just going to share it's not complicated. It's actually quite simple, but it's really big. You look at Twitter and you're like, hey, it's a very simple message app. And that's very naive to think. Because even on Twitter's end, they have a giant scale that they have to deal with, which is, I want to say, millions and millions of people. And I'm only dealing with, I want to say maximum 30,000, maybe it's up to 50,000 now. But the two apps, Twitter's obviously, they're all centralized, so they got different challenges there than here. But making a simple Twitter app clone is not as easy as you would think. You think you could do it in a weekend, and I can really rest assured that you cannot build it in a weekend. I've spent 2 weeks on this, having a blast, working really hard on it every day. But the feature set is endless, and then you really have to be careful of security and just lots of different things going on, and the best way to display all the data, there's a lot of things to think about in building this very basic web app, or what you think would be a very basic web app. It cannot be built in a weekend. So that to me was really fun to learn, and made me respect more, I guess, of the engineers at big companies that work on what you think are small apps. But yeah, so I guess I'll just go into the code a bit, because that's all I have really to show for this. It's kind of cool that you can go all the way back to the beginning. I'll just show you that. I think my first interaction with Nostr 8 months ago, and this is where we are today. So it's pretty cool seeing a new ecosystem alive. It was kind of like a barren wasteland, and now it's full of Bitcoin bros, to be honest. The only people on here are people who talk Bitcoin, and that wasn't really what I wanted with this protocol. And I created the Twitter version to be something a little bit more for everyone based. But it's just great to see that the protocol itself has taken off, and there's lots of client implementations and people building apps, and people are being funded for this. So I'd love to see more the rest of the world or other communities get engaged or host their own relays, that kind of thing. So with that being said, I will just jump into the code. I'll try to keep it very, very short. I can get pretty lengthy. I'm just going to highlight some of the bigger things. So the way I code web apps is a little different than everyone. I'm very used to vanilla JavaScript. So you can see here, I just have, I just have some CSS, so different CSS files for different things, so like variables, utilities, styles, and responsiveness. And then I have a ton of JavaScript files. I don't use pre-compilers or anything like that. I am thinking about using TypeScript or writing a TypeScript compiler, just that uses the Rust compiler and building a single tool. I stay away from package managers because they install things I don't know what's going on. So it's kind of just like a yikes to me. So I really only write or use the JavaScript that I know is in the project, and I'll just import it as is if I need to. A lot of this was pre-existing. For the previous code, it used to be, I think, just like 4 JavaScript files, and I broke it out into a lot of different ones. The main entry is obviously the main.javascript. Then the other thing, before I jump into anything else, a new piece of tech that I learned about is the content security policy that you can apply to your web app. So I'm very used to using the on-click on all of my elements, and I used to use that all the time. And I use it here too, but that is a disaster waiting to happen, because with this application, I have to think about what people are typing in. And since I'm loading it from different servers, I'm connected to multiple servers. You could have a rogue server and you could have rogue users. So it doesn't really matter. You have to basically prevent HTML injection into your page at all costs. And a way to do that is through the content security policy. And if you set default none, it prevents everything. And then you have to set what you want individually. So I want to allow connecting to my origin and to WebSockets anywhere. And that by itself is already kind of crazy. And then, you have script source, self only, and you have script source element, self, and then attribute. I have this one, which is the biggest breaker here, and which would require a rewrite of how I do things, is unsafe inline. So if you allow this, it basically allows for cross-site scripting to happen. If you reject it, don't allow it, then you're not allowed to use like on-click in the tag. And you have to do everything through add event listener in your own JavaScript. So a great way to make your application really safe is applying a content security policy that is very restrictive and only allows your own code to execute. And that's it. And I'm sure there's probably some other ways to do it, but I think the browser does a pretty good job here with, allowing you to pick and choose where you want to load media from. So that is the biggest one security concern, and how you can just block any web security issues from basically foreign attacks in that kind of way. As for other security issues, I'm not sure. I'm not a security expert, so I just thought this was a really good way to do it. But there may be other things, and I think extensions are also one of the biggest issues for browsers in general. There's reports all the time in the news of extensions taking people's information, like Netflix Party or any of those kind of extensions. So be aware of what you install for your extensions. The rest of this is very simple. I have a 3-step process. I have the container for the busy. This is when you initially load the page. It will have like a spinner trying to do things. You usually never see this. It's just there in case there's something's taking a little long. Then you have the container for the welcome. That's that welcome screen that you saw. Very simple. And you can see the on-click in use already right here. And then I just have my app here, which is just a bunch of HTML. So I have a global navigation, and then I have the navigation, and then I have the header, that's the universal header. Then I have the new post area, the profile, the loading events box, the show new, the timeline, and then the settings. So I just lay it all out. Super simple. You don't really need to worry about anything. Oops, that's not supposed to be like that. Yeah, so it's super simple. Most of the HTML is on there, or I just do inner HTML, and then I just write a string, and that's how I render things. Then there's a bunch of modals here, and you just use plain CSS to hide things. So yeah, then I just have, just that's the FAQ. So everything's just in the initial index HTML. That's it. Very straightforward. Let's see here. So I'm not going to go over the CSS at all. It's just kind of unneeded. It's plain vanilla CSS, and I use CSS3 for variables and calc and other things like that. The entry point here, I just have some constants. I have a model, and then I have some more constants. I wait for the DOM content loaded. Then there's waiting for the extension. So there are extensions for using your public-private key to sign messages. That's the best way to do it, rather than hand over your key to the web app. But if the web app's secure, then technically you don't even need to use the extension. But in my opinion, you should still use an extension. If for some reason there's something uncaught, you'll be safer that way. Then it just checks like, hey, do we have the public key or not, whatever. Sign in. This is the main part, just showing the spinner, redrawing profile picture if the that kind of thing, if it's loaded. Other than that, in its settings, there's some things here. So a little deep dive into like the settings page, or how I do things. So you just render your HTML like that, super fine, just using I can't remember what it's called, string it's not interpolation, but string formatting, and just binding the event listeners this way. Super simple, that kind of thing. Then you have your event listeners. So it's nothing fancy. It's not like React or anything like that. It's literally just like using what the browser gives you, plus some utility methods. So then you have your relay. And this relay is just like, when things are open or closed and that kind of thing. And then I have some timers and That's about it. So like on timestamps, it just updates all the timestamps on the page. Very dumb. Invalidations. This is what actually like, goes through if there's, which you'll see later. If there's invalidated events, then it'll like render them and add them to the show new. Then you have the saving of the settings, happens every second. And then, which doesn't really need to happen, but yeah. Then on tick, fetching any profiles in the queue. So with that being said, the major points to this is the whole event relay system. So what you want to do in Nostr is you want to fetch your own profile. So get your history and get your picture and your details from the relay. So, and you want to do that for every relay. And just what Yo does is it's really simple. And Damus Web does this too. It's just like whatever is the latest version of the information on any relay, it trumps whatever's there, right? So in the future, what you could do, something smarter, is be like, hey, merge based on like if this relay and this relay are different and one's newer than the other, whatever, then take this newer information and place it on top of this one, but keep the information from this one. So yeah. And then what you do is you subscribe to all your notifications, and you want to backfill it by however much you want to do in your app. I did 5,000 to be safe. Technically I could just do unlimited, but yeah. Then the other thing that you do, so your notifications are always on because you want to see whoever tags you in something. And then you have the Explorer, and that's always on. And with this technique, what it means is like you're always going to get stuff from the notifications, and they're going to be targeted at you. And then and it's really to get the history. And then when you have the Explorer open, because I think technically you can close the notifications after you get the history, but when you open the Explorer, then it's going to get everything in the world. And so since you're going to get everything in the world, you don't really have to worry about the notification at that point, because you can just check if like something's aimed at you, and then it registers a notification. Then you also, if you don't have, or if you have the contacts, then what you want to do is you want to fetch the history from your contacts to fill that the history, or like the home section or your friends section, because if you don't do this, your friends, or the home section, the friends section just has you in it if none of your friends have spoken, so it looks kind of empty. This will make it go pretty fast. Some basic logging. The EOS, I can't remember what EOS stands for, but basically it's like at the end of all the events that have been sent for the subscription ID, then it fires off this event. And so, for example, when you fire off like subscribe to Explorer, or like the history for the profile, and it sends you all the events, the server will say like, hey, I've sent you everything that I have for this request. And then you can just say like, okay, cool, unsubscribe from this request because I'm done with it. And as you'll see, we don't close the notifications or the Explorer one. But everything else, there's just a little bit of certain logic where we say, hey, do X, Y, Z, and then close the subscription for this relay for that. For that thing. And then, so here I do like a little bit of on the history or the thread or the friends, I just force refresh everything to make it easier on my life. A smoother thing to do would be like smartly, like, oh, if there's things already displayed, then just make sure they fit into the document fragment, and then bam, the document fragment back. Even then, though, that could be a little bit jumpy, but yeah. Or you'd have individual document fragments placed accordingly. Yeah, that'd be better. So there's that. Then on event, so yeah, you just I have some fetching things, so it's just, that doesn't matter. This is the big one here. This is where you process things. So based on the event, you get it from a relay. You want to basically just check like, hey, is it metadata? Then do metadata things. If it's context, then process the contacts. If it's a delete event, process deletion, that kind of thing. That's really all it does. So for example, in metadata, it would update the profiles in memory. Same with contacts. We keep track of deleted events on the client as well, so that we just remove them from the timeline if a delete event comes in. Same thing with reactions. So as soon as a reaction happens, what it does is we store that reaction information. Then I trigger the view to say like, hey, update this reaction. It will go find the event that the reaction is targeting and then redraw the reaction. So if it like you have a reaction badge, smiley face or whatever, and there's a bunch of smileys, it adds the profile pictures, and if it's greater than 5, it will just start counting instead. Then what happens is I add the event to the queue. So like, hey, like this event needs to be, rendered. So I have a list of invalidated events. So I just keep pushing that. So rather than saying like, hey, view update now, I say like, hey, add everything to a queue. And basically, it's like a first in, first out kind of system. So you add a bunch of IDs, and then the queue on the viewing system will then take that and pop it out. And then what you have to do is you may have got the event, you may have processed it, but that event may have referenced somebody else in some other way, and you don't have the information or you don't have that information on you. And so technically when you render the event, you're going to render it with the incorrect profile picture and the pub key as their username, which is very different from what we're used to today in centralized systems. In today's systems, everything is done like on the back end, or it's centralized, so you just have to go to like one server and get something you can get instantaneously. Well, here you get the event in, you don't know like where the user may come from. It like came from the relay, so then you say like, okay, well, relay, do you have the information for this user? And then you get it. So what you have to do is you have to store that information client side, and eventually you want to just like cache it in storage, so you have it available, and then you just update whatever ones that you don't have. But it's pretty fast. Yeah, it's just a lot different. You might get like, for example, in a centralized system, it might just have the profile information with the data that you receive. Here, it's like, no, you don't have it. Okay, send an event or a request to get that information. So you have to queue that, and there's a whole queue system around that. So yeah, if you're interested in that, they're the queuing system's right here, and it's in the source code for you to check. That's kind of like the model system. Then I'll just go to the basic view system. So that being state, it should probably be called view, but basically I have this apply timeline mode. And when you apply the timeline, what it does is it checks the mode and says, it goes through everything. Basically it changes the header, it updates the nav, that kind of thing. Then what happens is you do the view timeline refresh, and that's that hard refresh right there. And so this, all it does is it goes through all the events. So it says, hey, get me all the events in order. And that's probably an optimization here, is if you just have an ordered array all the time and you're updating that, that's great. This rebuilds it every time, which is very slow. But luckily view timeline refresh only happens on like when you change the page. Then it just checks like, hey, does this event belong here? And then it adds it. And since it's in order, we just like say we're going to max out at 1,000 events to display. And then we just keep going. And that's basically it. When you update the timeline, I don't actually do anything at all. What I do, when you update the timeline, it goes through that invalidation list here that I was showing you earlier, and it basically says for every invalidated ID, let's get that ID. If it's deleted, we're just gonna, if there's an event that's already like rendered, we're just gonna remove it and continue. Then what we're gonna do is, if it's not renderable, we're just going to skip. If it's already rendered, then we're going to skip it. Then we render it. Oops. So we render it. And if it's not capable of rendering, then we push it back onto the queue to be rendered later. If for some reason it wasn't able to render, then we just check like, hey, this is where notifications happen. So if this event references the user's key, then we're gonna, and the event is newer than the last seen notification, we're gonna count the number of notifications or increase the count to notifications. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna compare like the event to like say, hey, is this event greater than the latest event that's in the timeline, and increase that count. Then if we have any leftovers, so that ends the loop. Then we can say, hey, are there any leftovers? Add that back to the top of the queue. And then we check the count, and then if there's new stuff to show, then we show that. And if notification count is greater than 0, then we put a little marker on the notification by updating that. So that's kind of like the basic workings of the app. A lot of bugs happened, and there's a lot more to it than that. Like the code got quite verbose, in my opinion, and it's at this point in an application where I get tired of JavaScript. JavaScript is great for getting to this point, but at this point you kind of want to just stop, and you've gotten too big already. And I think this is where like TypeScript comes in, but like I really dislike pre-compilers. I don't think they really solve anything, even though TypeScript's probably pretty great. I think just having a different language for the browser would be better, and like maybe this is where like WebAssembly would be better. You could just like write your code in whatever language you want, and then make it easy, have easy bindings to update the views and things like that. So, and that might be a lot faster too. And the main thing I have issue why TypeScript is probably suitable for this is having types. When you've come this far into the application process, it's no longer a small app. This has become quite a big app, and when you need to fix bugs or refactor something, having a type safe language makes it really easy to do that and check your homework. So I refactored the profiles storage in the model yesterday, and that was here. So I had profiles, and before it used to be an object, and there's an additional object for profiles to events. And when I did that, I broke everything, and I had a new model or a bunch of new methods that I had to use in order to do that. And if I had a typed language that I was able to then compile or check or somehow simulate compilation, it would have caught all that. I wouldn't have to run around and fix a bunch of bugs, and I would have saved myself a couple hours, in my opinion. So like refactoring tools have been a lot easier, that kind of thing. I mean, there's probably other good tools, but I think just that itself, just press build. Did it build? It built? Okay, then you did it right. If it didn't build, then you did something wrong. It highlights the line that it didn't work, and you just go fix it, rather than chasing it down in a trial error kind of thing. Like, okay, launch in the browser. Did it work? Oh, I forgot to test this one area, so therefore I pushed it live, and then somebody else encountered the error, and that's not what you want. So I'm guessing TypeScript exists to save you there, but I think JavaScript itself could use types. I don't want to have to use a language on top of a language to do that. So yeah. Anyways, there's a lot more code here. A lot of different things. I guess like the last thing I would like to show actually is the IndexedDB. You can just go read it yourself, but this is kind of what I came up with. I have like this function called database call, and what that does is it opens the database, and then it creates all of the object stores that you need, and then it basically just calls the function that you pass into it. And even this can be abstracted more, but yeah, very simple. I don't like it though. I don't like IndexedDB. It works well though. I just don't like the API design. I think that's my problem. I think I just don't like promises in general either. But I'm sure if I spend time, I can make a nice wrapper for it. And there are some out there. And it's like, why don't you just use Forage DB or whatever, or local forage or things like that? I don't want to use a third-party library that has support for WebSQL and local storage and whatever else as fallbacks if I just want to use a certain technology, which is IndexedDB, that all browsers support now. So I just opted to write my own crappy code for it. I was kind of surprised there wasn't a wrapper for just IndexedDB that was better than the browser implementation, but like I find the fact that browser APIs have wrappers all the time for doing things, and I wonder if that's just a fact of bad API design or misinterpreting the needs of developers, or whatnot. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, that's been it. There's been 170 new posts since I started or clicked the show new button. So yeah, you can actually check the app out at yosup.app. So that's it. Little notification bell. Yeah, that works. Anyways, have a good New Year. It is December 30th. So cheers and Happy New Year.